Hi, today I'm going to tell about the section titled The Sugar King and Other Agricultural Monarchs. In these pages, Galeano distilled the history of the region through the emblematic crops that have been not only source of wealth but also silent witness to the exploitation and socioeconomic complexities that define Latin America. On the other hand, we will talk about the sugar king and other agricultural monarchs. In this session, Eduardo Galeano analyzed the role of agricultural products in the economic and social history of Latin America. Galeano says that these products have been used as an instrument of colonial domination and exploitation and that they have contributed to the poverty and inequality in the region. The chapter begins with a description of sugarcane cultivation in Latin America. Sugarcane was a very profitable crop and soon became the main source of wealth for the colonial elites. The cultivation of sugarcane required a large amount of labor, which was provided by African slaves. The slave trade was a fundamental part of the colonial economy, and millions of Africans were brought to America to work on sugar plantations. Sugar was a very important product for the development of capitalism in Europe. Sugar from Latin America was exported to Europe where it was consumed by the upper classes. The sugar trade generated great profits for European metropolises and helped finance the Industrial Revolution. In Latin America, the cultivation of sugar cane have a devastating impact on the indigenous and African population. Indigenous people were forced to work on plantation in slave-like conditions and many died from disease or exhaustion. Africans were subject to regime of exploitation and violence, and their culture was almost completely destroyed. Galeano also analyzed the cultivation of other agricultural products in Latin America, such as rubber, cocoa, corn, and coffee. These products were also used as instruments of colonial domination and exploitation and contribute to the poverty and inequality in the region. Galeano concludes the chapter by arguing that agricultural products has been a source of wealth for elites, but have contributed to the poverty and inequality for general population, and mentioned that this situation is the result of an economic system that privileges the rich and exploits the poor people. The section The Sugar King and Other Agricultural Monarchs have important historical implications for the issues of health and migration, climate change, socialism and neoliberalism, social and community participation. Regarding health and migration, Galeano describes the devastating impact that the cultivation of agricultural products such as sugarcane have on the indigenous and African population of Latin America. Indigenous and African people were forced to work on plantations in slave-like conditions, and many died from disease or exhaustion. These factors had a negative impact on the health of the indigenous and African population. The cultivation of agricultural products has also been an important factor in internal and external migration in Latin America. People living in rural areas where the cultivation of agricultural products is concentrated are often forced to migrate in search of better economic and health opportunities. Another topic that we relate and consider important is climate change, because agriculture is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions such as methane and carbon dioxide. Regarding social and community participation, the cultivation of agricultural products has been a source of social conflict in Latin America. Peasants who produce food are often exploited by large agricultural companies.
Hello, my name is Dana and this is Shepard. I will talk about the software source of power where Galeano analyzes the impact of the exploitation of Latin America's natural resources. Galeano tells us about the North American economy, which is based on the mineral from Latin America as well as the long that need repair. The exploitation of Latin Americans' natural resources has had a negative impact on the regions. It has contributed to the poverty and inequality since the wealth generation by the exploitation of the sea resources has ended up in the hands of foreign companies and levanted the population impoverished. Mining, for example, pollutes water and air, and deforestation for oil and gas extraction contributes to the climate change. Galeano prefers describes the exploitation of the natural resources of the Amazon forest, causing conflicts in disease with fines, oil, gas, water, and minerals. The indigenous communities have been displaced from their lands and have evidenced the destruction of their natural resources. It is identified as a result of all disease caused from years ago and today. Poverty and inequality are increasing as well as guaranteed and dependency, for example, to the export of natural resources. And adding to this increment corruption in Latin American countries. Epidemiology impact by increment in communicable diseases such as malaria, dengue, cholera, and tuberculosis. Increase in chronic diseases such as heart disease, chronic respiratory disease, and cancer. Challenge in disease partners such as the emergence of new disease or the increment in the prevalence of extinct disease.
Hi, below is the analysis of Chapter 4 History of Early Death. Offers a compelling analysis of the impacts of exploitation and looting on the region's public health. This analysis is important to understand the cause of health inequalities and inequity in Latin America. One of the main the relationship between exploitation and looting and the social determinants of health. Exploitation and looting have had a devastating impact on the social determinants of health in Latin America. They have contributed to poverty, inequality, discrimination, and violence, which are factors that increase the risk of disease. The relationship between exploitation and looting and the health system, exploitation and looting have contributed to the financing of the health system in Latin America. This has hindered access to quality health service for the population. The European conquest and colonization of Latin America was a process of extermination and plunder that had devastating impact on the health of the indigenous population. European conquerors brought disease to America that decimate the indigenous population. Additionally, the indigenous people were subject to forced labor, which exposed them to inhuman living conditions that contribute to their premature death.
European countries brought diseases such as smallpox, measles, and flu, which decimate the indigenous population. Additionally, indigenous people were job subject to forced labor, which exposed them to inhumane living conditions such as a lack of housing, poor nutrition, and overwork. These conditions contribute to a high mortality rate among the indigenous people. Slavery also had a devastating impact on the health of the African population. African slaves were brought to America against their will and subject to inhuman living conditions. They were forced to work long hours in dangerous conditions and were subject to physical and sexual abuse. This led to a high death rate among slaves. The impact of slavery on the health of the African population can be seen in demographic data of the time. For example, it is estimated that the enslaved African population in America fell from 10 millions to 5 million in the 96. This population decline was due to a combination of factors including disease, inhuman living conditions, and violence.
Hello, my name is Valentina, and I'm going to talk to you about the chapter of the contemporary structure of dispossession. Galeano begins by pointing out that the structure of dispossession in Latin America is based on the region's economic dependence on developed countries. This dependence is manifested in the fact that Latin America exports mainly raw materials and primary products, while importing manufactured goods and technology. This unequal trade structure of developed countries to appropriate a large part of the wealth generated in Latin America. Latin American workers are often subjected to precarious working conditions and low wages. This allows foreign companies to make large profits at the expense of workers. Latin American governments are often appropriated by foreign capital and used to repress social movements fighting for workers' rights and development in the region. The structure of this position in Latin America is a colonial legacy that continues to condition the region's development. To overcome this structure, it is necessary to carry out a radical transformation of the economic and political model of Latin America. The relationship with public health and epidemiology. Increased poverty and inequality, which are risk factors for a range of diseases. Reduced access to health service. Latin American governments have fewer resources to invest in health. Damage to the environment, which can lead to disease. Harm to the health of workers who are subject to precarious working conditions and low wages, and spread on infection diseases as a consequence of forced migration. The relationship with health and development, reduced productivity as poverty and inequality can reduce worker productivity. Harm to education as poverty and inequality can also hinder access to education and stimulation of violence, which can also affect development.